Okay, so we're going to talk today about the right to privacy. And the right to privacy is something that's been controversial because it's not actually in the Constitution specifically. Nowhere in the Constitution is the word privacy used. So where did it come from, and uh, why is it today that we assume that we have this right to privacy? Well, the first time this right is enunciated by the Supreme Court is in the Supreme Court case of Griswold versus Connecticut. I believe it's 1966, somewhere right around there. This involved a Connecticut law which made it a crime for married couples to seek advice about contraception. Uh, so if they'd gone to the doctor and the doctor said, well, there's a pill, there are condoms or whatever, the doctor could be arrested. Well, this is challenged. And the Supreme Court struck down the Connecticut law, saying it was a violation of the right to privacy. People go, right to privacy? Where is that in the Constitution? Well, the court came up with what we call the penumbra theory. Penumbra means in the shadows of, or in the borderline. Sometimes if you see a crescent moon, but you can see the rest of the moon in the shadows, that's the moon's penumbra. And what the Supreme Court said was that if you take the First, Third, Fourth, Fifth, Ninth, and 14th Amendments, and you put them together, somewhere in the borderline of all those amendments is an implied right to privacy. And so that is a controversial decision that leads to another controversial decision, and that's the one that deals with the right of illegal abortion. And that was the case of Roe v. Wade in 1973. We're coming up on the 50th anniversary of that. This involved a Texas law which outlawed abortions in every instance, in every case, except for life of the mother. And this was challenged. And the Supreme Court, and it was such an important decision that they all wrote opinions on it. The Supreme Court said this in Roe v. Wade. They said that during the first trimester, that abortion must be left up to the medical doctors. In other words, you can get an abortion if you want one. If you can find the doctor to do it, state can't interfere. During the second trimester, the state may regulate abortion to protect maternal health, but not abolish it. So they can put some health regulations on it, but not ban it. And then in the third trimester, which the Supreme Court refers to as the stage subsequent to viability, in other words, the fetus could live outside the womb, the state may regulate and even ban abortion, except for in cases involving the life of the mother. So the debate here, really, when you talk about abortion, is when is a fetus a person with legal rights? And that's what the constant debate goes back and forth on. And over the years, we've seen this battle go on now for about 50 years. And we've seen more and more regulations on abortion. And usually what the Supreme Court's going to be asking about abortion is how much of a restriction that you put on it is infringing on a woman's right to privacy between her and her medical doctor. And we could go through hundreds of cases like that that have been up before the court, and it's still going on. But we're just going to keep it simple with that case right there and knowing where it began. We're not going to go through the myriad of individual cases. But looking at the Supreme Court and talking about privacy, let's look at where sometimes they seem to go in the opposite direction. There's a case from the 1980s called Bowers versus Hardwick, and it came out of Georgia. And this law involved an anti-sodomy law, which made it a crime for homosexuals to engage in sexual activity. And in this case, the police came to a house, and the landlord had been renting a room to somebody, and the police walked into the room, and this couple was caught in the act, this homosexual couple, and they arrested them for the violation of the anti-sodomy law. Now, if you wonder how they could get in there, because the landlord let them in. So the Supreme Court in Bowers versus Hardwick said the state can ban homosexual activity. So when you're thinking about privacy, you're talking about consenting adults in their own bedroom, and the state says the government can come into that bedroom and ban the activity that you are doing. Well, that case was eventually overturned in Lawrence v. Texas in the 2000s, dealing with homosexual sodomy, and those laws have been struck down. There have been some talk of occasionally by some politicians on the fringe saying, well, let's abolish all sodomy, make it a crime. Well, that'd be difficult to do. So privacy is getting to be a much hotter issue today, especially with online information, what Facebook does with your information, Twitter, how your cell phone can follow you where you're going to go, wherever you are, there's cameras. And so the question is, how much of our privacy are we willing to give up to private corporations? And that's something that's going to continue to be a debate, I think, for some time. Anyway, that's a short lecture on privacy. We have one last lecture left before I do a video review, and that lecture will be on civil rights. So I'll probably get that up this weekend.